when you're just interested in property or money. You're going to war against some very, very powerful people on this third rock from the sun. And the crown is an institution that is feared, but everything has its time, everything has its place, everything has its destiny. And my next talk will be on, we're going to go right into Lone Ranger. One last thing I want to talk about before we go into Lone Ranger is this bottle lightning, this honing a sickle. I'm going to give you a visual representation of what gets created when you do something so silly as to try to square a circle, try to go against natural law, try to create a multiracial, multicultural utopia, scientific racist utopia, and only white children's countries. Well, you create something like a Mr. Metzger at resist.com, or maybe it's lonewolf.com. I don't know what his website is, but you can look him up. Tom Metzger. Every intelligence agency in the world knows about him. Yes, everyone in the world knows about him. Because they are exactly what someone like China would point to when it comes to bottling lightning. This guy was just an average Republican, just a normal white guy, normal working class white guy, just average Joe. He only concerned with the little white rabbits. He was concerned with their future and how the country was run in America. And the next thing you know, through harassment, through conditions, through whatever, he's a violent revolutionary. He espouses a cell-structure philosophy and actually has manuals, military manuals and whatnot, very good military manuals, surviving, evading, so on and so forth on his website, full of racialist type of information. He's been around a long time. But he's an example of what happens, what you create when you bottle lightning, when you hone a sickle. You see, under normal conditions, Mr. Metzger wouldn't be in his circumstances. He's just a Republican, and I want to say he was a Baptist or maybe a Catholic, but I know he was a Christian. He's just an average Joe. But you harass someone whose only concern is for white rabbits. He wants them to have a home, whatever. In other words, if so-called Western civilization were to move to, let's say, Russia, all little white rabbits move to Russia, well, he'd get on a plane and go. He's not going to shoot anybody. I don't think he's ever committed a violent act. Some people may be attached to him but I don't think he's ever set off in fact, I know he hasn't set off a bomb or anything like that. Not that he couldn't. I mean, you go from something like Mr. Metzger at a local Republican convention, just at his local Baptist church, or maybe his local Catholic parish, I don't know his religion, or lack thereof, and next thing you know, he's might as right. It takes a lot to do that under natural law. You have to bottle lightning, you have to hone a sickle, you have to do the impossible. And no one knows where that could go. But my point is, he's just average Joe. If Western civilization moved to Russia, he'd get on a plane, he'd go learn Russian, he'd go be with little white rabbits there. He'd say, okay, well, Western civilization has been expanding for hundreds of years, now it's consolidating. I can't control that, but they got a home. It's too bad, so sad. He's not necessarily someone interested in firing a bullet, but I'm trying to explain to you what you create when you do something as crazy as try to bottle lightning or hone. You end up trying to square a circle, but you don't. You can't square a circle. You just took a little white rabbit and turned him into a white tiger, and he's ticked off. You ticked off the circles, but under normal conditions, they're not in that mindset. He's not interested in that, but he's not the nice little lovable guy he was when at 14. He's been harassed to death just because he's concerned about him, and maybe he didn't play the game correctly. Maybe he was a little rough. Maybe but whatever. You do what you know. When you know better, you do better. But he prescribes a wide sky philosophy, what they call the lone wolfers. There are several groups famous for that in North America. He's one of them around the world. Why? Because it works. That type of stuff works. Cell structure works. That's why people do it. It's been around thousands of years, actually, but it works. It just does. But he's what you do when you have a common sense of oppression created among a group that aren't victims. He's not a victim. He could choose to exercise power in a variety of different ways. He went from Terrible Tommy at the local Republican convention to, where's my C4? Where's my C4? That's funny stuff. He should put that on MP3 and sell it. Where's my C4? Intelligence agents around the world hear that and fall on the ground laughing, but it's serious stuff. What are you going to do with something like that? That energy is going to flow eventually. You got to head that off. Even if you were to come to power in a political situation, Mexican may have to, the Europeans running Mexico may have to fire a missile into Texas or something to get rid of that energy. You may have to start a war. That's what the Chinese are worried about. What are you going to do with that? That's got to go somewhere. It's going to go somewhere. That's the only thing you know. I guess you could disengage it, and next thing you know, so-called Western civilization shifts, and he's going to get on a plane and leave without shooting anybody. But I'm giving you an example of someone you can visually read about that under normal conditions, white rabbits are white rabbits. They're not white tigers. They're not interested in running around grabbing people, ripping their heads off. But when you hone a sickle, when you try to bottle lightning, when you try to square a circle, you go against natural law, and eventually you're going to create a wild scenario. But that's something very visual. You can see, you can do your homework on. Every intelligence agency on the planet knows about Mr. Metzger. Why? Because he's a visual example of what I just laid out for you. He's bottled lightning. Not that he has any power himself. You can go pick him up, you can shoot him, whatever. But the question would remain to someone like me, how many of those are there? Well, you don't know, do you? I don't. No one does. I don't care what they say. They don't. He doesn't. If you advocate a wide sky scenario, walking into even a velvet revolution, you sometimes, I don't know who my cooperatives are going to be. I don't need to know that. I know the masses are asses. I know a handful will do it, and that's fine. Some little girl's going to wink and nod and get my job done. Believe it or not, that's how it works. It works. Why? I don't do what doesn't work. But talking points, buzzwords, putting someone on point, this stuff works. Wide sky stuff always works. What you don't see can kill you politically. Well, lone wolfer stuff works simply because you don't know. I mean, you could have a scenario in North America or even somewhere like Canada where two lone wolves sitting next to each other at the local power station decide to pull a plug, figure out they're both lone wolfers. Well, steely-eyed lone wolfers wink and nod. Next thing you know, pull the plug and shut down all of Canada. Well, white tiger, they turn into white tigers. They go from little white rabbits to white tigers and just accidentally do something. People are worried about that. That's something to be worried about. Even if they're on your side, they're worried about that. But this is something I want you to look into, because I'm trying to give you an idea of what other people around the world are looking at. You're only looking to the world through your perspective, and that's fine. That's your deal. I mean, you're a human being. That's what you're, just a white rabbit. You're trying to figure out what's going on. But you create a a terrible Tommy from just a little Tommy Metzger. You create you're in that type of environment. You're in an unquantifiable scenario. Again, you haven't squared a circle. Squaring a circle is impossible. You took a little white rabbit and turned him into a white tiger. He's got his Godzilla out. Godzilla's our green goddess. She's all our weapons, all our crazy stuff we do that no one can explain, all our technology. He can put Godzilla on point. You don't know what he could do. Who knows? I don't know. The first thing I would do if I were a lieutenant colonel is I'd go cut a deal with him, because you just don't know. You don't want him backdooring you. Even if you were doing a violent revolution, he doesn't even know. That's the problem with when you get into wide sky scenarios. You don't know anything. And it's funny how this stuff works. You don't know it until it's over with. In velvet scenarios, this stuff is comedy when it starts working. But when you start talking about a situation of a common sense of oppression among a group of non-victims, a bunch of little white rabbits who are now white tigers walking around Siegfried and Roy, you don't know when they're going to snap and drag everyone off the stage or do whatever they choose to do. I'm not the war of the flea, the war of the me variety. I'm a velvet deal, because even by the way, even in any type of revolution, violent or otherwise, before you swing the samurai sword, you have to say hi-ya. You have to be on the consistent set of talking points. That's what Common Sense was about. Thomas Paine's book in the American Revolution. That's what we do. It doesn't matter. My tactics transform to any normal society anywhere in the world. There's always a mini revolution going on at your local corporation, at your local church. Sure. My tactics are usable in any situation. They're just not violent, which means they're much more dynamic. They're useful going into any type of revolutionary or any normal functioning society. Believe it or not, I'm going to teach you all kinds of neat stuff. But most of it involves the legwork. Always involves I use Aryan girl rabbits. Yes, I use generally white women at control points. But I'm going to go into some funny stuff. But but I'm going to talk about Lone Ranger next. I wanted to cover that because that's a visual example of something you can see today. I want you looking at things today and trying to analyze things correctly. I want you to don't think in terms of all hope is lost around a victim, because you're not a victim. You're nowhere close to a victim. Victims don't have any power. You have power, therefore you're not a victim. We must have a consistent thought process and motive